With just 5 days remaining until the end of the transfer deadline, Tottenham are looking to pull off one or two more signings, potentially a defender and a goalkeeper, before we all don our yellow ties to watch the window slam shut. Meanwhile, after Saturday's comfortable victory against an abject Everton side, I'll be discussing the 10 things I felt we learnt from that performance. And elsewhere, Chelsea are looking to buy more big money players, and Victor Osimhen is being offered about to Premier League clubs for as little as £65 million. All that and more on today's episode of Daily Premier League Transfer News with me, Barnaby Slater. Guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. Please do press that like button. It really helps this video get seen by more people. And do subscribe. If you're not already a subscriber, press that subscribe button, press the bell button so you know when my daily content comes in. And you can become a member. Only £1 a month really helps me to make this daily content for you. All the details in the description box below. But let's get started, as ever, with Tottenham Hotspur. And not a lot of huge transfer news going on with Spurs, but we are being linked with Barcelona and Denmark international and former Chelsea player Andreas Christensen, the 28-year-old centre-half, seemingly surplus to requirements at Barcelona, and both Manchester United and Spurs seemingly interested in the player. What do you think of him? Obviously, he would come in as a potential fourth choice centre-back at Spurs. He'd be, I guess, fighting Radu Dragusin for that third place spot. I don't know how you felt on Saturday afternoon when Mickey van der Ven went down clutching his knee, but I personally saw our entire season like ahead of my body, thinking that really we have nobody to replace the attributes that Van der Ven has. I do rate Radu Dragusin, of course I do, but I think he's more of a natural replacement for Romero on the right-hand side. Is Christensen the kind of player that you could see come into Spurs and do a job if Van der Ven was injured or suspended? I also just slightly worry with him that he'd be on very high wages, having gone from Chelsea to Barcelona. And also at 28, would he really be motivated enough to come in and play kind of second fiddle to such a distinguished centre-half pairing that we have in Romero and Van der Ven? So I'm not sure about that one. I'd give that one a transfer rating maybe only about 6 out of 10. But would you like to see Andreas Christensen come in? Obviously, a lot of people have been asking for us to buy ready-made players who can come into our Premier League team or into our Premier League squad, and Christensen certainly would be one of those, but it would be a lot of money on wages, that's for sure. Some more Spurs news. Heung-min has just received his first call up to the South Korean national side. Only 18 years old, the winger who's coming to Spurs in December, January time. What a future he has ahead of him. And also, obviously, with Wilson Odobert having made his debut on Saturday as our kind of the first proper dribbly winger we've had in a long time, other than maybe Manor Solomon, who, by the way, has just agreed to join Leeds on loan for the season, which I think is a good move for Manor Solomon, because what a lot of people forget about Solomon is, yes, he had a bad injury last season that kept him out most of the year, but also in his final season when he was on loan at Fulham, he suffered from injuries then as well. So a move down to the Championship where he can be one of the first names on the team sheet, get some minutes under his belt, could be really helpful in terms of his future career, possibly at Spurs, but maybe more likely in terms of getting a transfer fee to go somewhere else. But yeah, as I mentioned, Heung-min first call up to the South Korean national side. That'll give him confidence. And looking forward to the possibility going into the new year of maybe having two players playing out wide who can beat a man with acceleration and really offer something different on both sides for us. Also, Spurs news outgoings. Ashley Phillips has joined Stoke on loan. And some Spurs kind of indirect news, which is that I'm sure you've seen Jack Clarke left Sunderland to join Ipswich for a fee in excess of £20 million. And as a result, Spurs have made about £5 million from the sell-on clause that we had in Jack Clause's contract from when we sold him to Sunderland. So a little bit more money coming in, hopefully, that could potentially be spent in these last few days of the window, where I'm expecting Spurs to look at maybe a fourth choice centre-back, third or fourth choice centre-back, and a reserve goalkeeper, because I think all the talk coming out of Spurs is that maybe Fraser Forster, they'd like him to move to the third choice keeper. So we're looking for a young kind of reserve goalkeeper. Okay, as I mentioned, obviously, a real relief to get that 4-0 win against Everton at the weekend. I did say in the opening they were abject. Very poor side, that's important to remember, but you can only beat what's in front of you. And I just want to go into a little bit what I felt were the 10 things that I learned from that performance. But before I go into them, I just want to mention a clean sheet, first clean sheet in a long time for Spurs a good defensive performance, didn't really give away many chances. And like I mentioned, I was so afraid when Van de Ven went down, but he really did have a great performance. Okay, in terms of the 10 things we learned, the first thing is I really feel like we need to be, as a fan base, I know it's difficult, but we need to try and be a little bit less reactive, by which I mean when things are difficult, like when we got the draw at Leicester, they're not as bad as it seems. It doesn't mean we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It doesn't mean we have to think that the season is over before it started. Equally, when they're good, and we've just beaten Everton 4-0, that doesn't mean we're going to win the Premier League either. We've got to just be realistic. We're in the middle of a project, and is just starting to get the kind of squad together that he feels can make the most of his style and his formation, and it's going to take some bedding in. So things aren't as bad when we don't get a good result, and they're not as good when we do get a great result. It's somewhere in between. Can we now put together a run of games to start challenging? Obviously, we've got Newcastle away next, and then Arsenal at home. That Newcastle away game is going to be fascinating because last year they, turned us over very easily, but by playing a low block and hitting us on the break with Alexander Isak. Do you remember? It was one of Mickey van der Ven's very few bad moments where he got kind of turned and slipped a couple of times against Isak. Now, will Ange learn at all and think, can Spurs maybe play a little bit more cleverly and not just send every single player forward, knowing then that Newcastle can transition and hit us with the kind of quality that, say, Everton didn't really have, and not even Leicester had, to be honest? Or will we go hell for leather and just hope that we outscore them? Let me know in the comments what you think Ange will do. Do I think we could outscore them? Yeah, I do. But also Newcastle, they're a cut above in terms of quality defensively. And Nick Pope is fit now as well. And in the last 2 seasons at St James's Park, we've been pretty much trounced. So I think this will be a big moment for our season. Similar really to what happened with Arsenal at the weekend. They got a massive result away at Aston Villa. Aston Villa had done them dirty last season, both home and away. They got a massive result. Can Spurs go to Newcastle, really put a marker down and show the rest of the league that actually this season our squad depth is better and we are able to get results at places we weren't able to last season? Speaking of squad depth, the second thing I wanted to talk about, I think this squad depth will allow us to cope with injuries and suspensions so much better. And a good example is that last season, if we had 2 key players from the spine of the team out, we really did struggle. So, for instance, as we did against Everton, we had Solanke out and we had Bentancur out. And last season, if we had 2 players out of the spine, we struggled. We definitely struggled to beat teams in low blocks, and we often looked disjointed. But this Saturday, obviously, it didn't make a difference. We brought in players from our squad who had the attributes that Ange wants from his players, and therefore we were able to continue playing the same type of game and really pull Everton ragged. Really, they were really up against it all game and didn't really offer much going forward, other than maybe that kind of 3-4 minute spell just before half time where they got a number of corners and we gave away a couple of silly free kicks. The third one I want to talk about, and things I felt we learnt: fluidity. It's very clear that Ange wants players who are versatile, and therefore when he sets out his team selection before a game, the opposition don't know who's going to be playing where. And frankly, how could Everton possibly have known who was going to be playing where when even I, as a Spurs fan who watches a lot of Tottenham, I didn't know which player was going to play in which position? Was Kulusevski going to play false 9? Or was Sonny going to play in the 9 and Kulusevski play wide? Or was Kulusevski going to play in the 8? And actually, in the end, he did play in the 8. And that moves me on nicely onto the fourth thing I wanted to talk about, which is the importance of Decky Kulusevski within this Tottenham squad. His versatility, his ability to play in numerous different positions well, always a minimum kind of 6.5, 7 out of 10. I thought he was outstanding at the weekend, 8 or 9 out of 10. And just that strength he's got on the ball, his low centre of gravity, his vision, his passing awareness. I know a lot of people, a lot of Spurs fans get very frustrated with him when he's playing out wide right. Well, I felt most of the time against Everton he was playing more in that inside right position with Johnson outside him, and that really made it a lot more comfortable to watch than when maybe Sarr is playing in that role with Johnson outside him, because they both run in straight lines, whereas Kulusevski always looking to cut inside, always looking to play reverse balls. Obviously his set up for Bissouma's goal was brilliant, very confident and patient in the box, composed, laid that ball back with beautiful weight for Bissouma to hit first time. And I just think we really need to understand how important Kulusevski is to this squad, where he is a fighter as well, but also he doesn't throw his toys out of the pram if he's on the bench one week like he was last week. Came straight back in and showed just how important he is. The fifth thing I wanted to talk about in terms of things I felt I learnt from this performance is also related to Kulusevski, which is that for the first time that I can really remember, against a low block side, Big Ange played two kind of number 8s. He played Kulusevski with Maddison. And I think that is something we can hopefully look forward to against all the teams that we play, especially at home, who are going to be low block teams, because it enabled us to have another ball player, and it enabled us to stretch Everton. It enabled us to make players double up from Everton on players like Wilson Odobert, who I'll talk a bit more about, and therefore more space was available for Maddison and Kulusevski. And they're lock pickers, aren't they? They've got great vision and great through balls, and actually playing Kulusevski really allowed Maddison to make a couple of runs in behind, which we haven't really seen that much of from him. The last time I can really remember him making a run in behind was when he scored against Bournemouth early in last season, when Sarr kind of slotted him through. But he had a couple of chances in behind, one that was well saved in the first half by Pickford, who really closed down the angle, and then in the second half he ran over and he was just trying to get a shot on the half volley, didn't really make the most of it. But Kulusevski being in there, I think, lets Maddison think, okay, we've got another creative player in there, so I'm able to make a late run, and that's something that Spurs haven't really benefited from, a kind of midfielder late run since the heyday of Dele Alli, who used to be so brilliant at that. So certainly for those games against deep blocks, I'd be tempted to play 2-8s, Kulusevski and Maddison, because we're less in danger of getting hit on the transition against those teams. And again, it brings up an interesting question in terms of, will we dare do that at St James's Park? I don't think we will. I think Pat Matasar will come back in at St James's Park because we'll need that energy in terms of chasing back transitions. But if Eddie Howe does play as defensively as he did last season and just try and aim to get us on the counter-attack and set pieces, then maybe there is something to say to take that risk. But I doubt that'll happen. Okay, number 6, I want to talk a little bit about Pedro Porro, who's low-key, I think, one of our best players in years at Tottenham Hotspur. Technically so gifted. There is nothing he can't do, and often he goes under the radar. I know he got the goal against Leicester, brilliant late run into the box, beautiful flicked on header. But even against Everton, he played beautifully, just does everything right, so brave on the ball, never flustered. Little passes, always kind of never just admiring his pass, always giving it and then going and getting another one. And it must be hell, I think, for opposition players to think about the fullback being so gifted, who can crop up in that number 8, number 10 spot, or outside the box who can take a brilliant shot. Same with the doggy on the left-hand side, kind of slightly different types of fullback, but certainly just as technically gifted. And I know a lot of people who play fancy Premier League are picking Pedro Porro as one of their defenders, and rightly so, because he's always likely to pop up with a goal and assist. But I just wanted to talk about him as, I think, one of our most underrated and important players that we've had for a long time at Tottenham Hotspur. 7th thing I wanted to talk about is the penny finally starting to drop for Yves Bissouma. Obviously, small sample size, his first appearance this season after that suspension. I do think he's in the last chance saloon with Tottenham, certainly with Tottenham's fans, but also with Big Ange Postecoglou. But I was very impressed at the weekend, not just from his brilliant finish, his brilliant goal, his first goal for Tottenham Hotspur, but also his recovery runs. When we did lose the ball, and we did lose it in transition, his recovery sprints were as impressive as I've ever seen from him. And that is what we need from that number 6 player. And we need that from him. And I think he will have seen Bentancur's decent performance, especially in the first half against Leicester, and thought, if I'm going to get back into this side properly in the long term, I'm going to need to work as hard backwards as I do on the ball. Look, he's a baller. We know that he's talented on the ball. We know that he's brave and he takes it on the half turn and he wants to link up play and start possession. But he needs to look when we lose the ball in transition and make those recovery sprints. And I really thought he did that very well against Everton. Number 8, I want to talk about Wilson Odobert. Very impressive first game for Spurs. Very brave decision from Ange Postecoglou to throw him in, but I think that is because he really offers us something we haven't had. And I think if he stays fit, the one thing I really did want to say is, if Odobert does stay fit, it might make that re-signing of Timo Werner on loan look a little bit foolish, because it's very hard to see how Timo is going to get into that left wing spot ahead of Odobert. Now, I think Werner will get some minutes off the bench, of course he will, but the way Odobert started, what he does so brilliantly that Spurs have really missed and needed, is he puts his foot on the ball and he can take the defender left or right, and therefore quite often the opposition defender at the weekend, or defenders, were having to double up on him, and then he would cut back and bring it back into the centre of the pitch, pass it on to another player, and therefore we had players over on the other side. It enabled us to keep the ball in the final third so much better than we have done for a long time. and really stretched the play. And I think that's one reason why we really battered Everton into submission. They were incredibly tired because we were just always in the final third, keeping the ball, bringing the ball back, replenishing it and starting again. And Odegaard was great at that. And there will be games where Odegaard, once he's got into the rigours of the fitness of having to play for Ange, he looked a little bit tired in the second half, that's for sure. There will be games then when he's absolutely free on the transition and he will get chances to properly run at defences and score goals and make assists as well. So I think it's been a shrewd signing by Spurs. Still only 18, 19 years old, so he will make mistakes. Obviously, you saw he made a bad pass just before he was brought off. That will happen and we have to be patient with him. But another shrewd move from Johan Lange and Ange Postecoglou, Scott Munn, the recruitment team, to get a player in under the radar. I was very impressed. The ninth thing I want to talk about in terms of things we learned: never write Son Heung-min off. We did talk about it. I talked about it in terms of him having a not great performance against Leicester. That's the reality. But he was asked to play very wide left on the touchline, and it was against a deep block, and it was very difficult for him. This time, we made him a great chance through Mickey van der Ven for the second goal, and the first goal, all his own work. Pressure. Pickford with a heavy touch, nicked in ahead of him, composed on the finish. 2 goals in 2 games for Sonny now, start of the Premier League season. Would it surprise me if he scored 20 Premier League goals again? Not at all. He's our elite finisher. I say it all the time. If we get chances, we want them to fall to Son Heung-min. Never write that man off. Still one of the world's most deadly finishers. And the final thing I want to talk about in terms of the 10 things we learned from that Everton 0 Spurs 4 game, I think James Maddison showed me do you know what? He showed me he was great and back somewhere near his best form in terms of on the ball. But more importantly, there was a period at the back end of the first half, like I mentioned before, where we gave away a number of free kicks and corners and Everton were putting us under pressure. And Maddison showed me in that period how committed he is and how confident he is and how much he wants it, because he was like a dog in there. There were some little scraps in the 6-yard box and he was going for every header first, getting up first. And Christian Romero's talked a lot about how he wants to impress on his teammates to have that kind of dog in them and fight for every scrap. And I think the first one I've really seen who's taken that on is Maddison. He is an unlikely defender in a situation like that where it's like head tennis, but he was really going for it. And that impressed me almost more than anything. That little 1-2 minute little spell where Maddison was like, we are not going to concede a goal here. I'm going to get my head on everything. I'm going to clear everything. And that, as well as his performance on the ball, really impressed me. He had the most progressive passes from anyone in the Premier League this weekend. And I think all we need now is a Maddison goal to go in this season. He's got a couple of assists already to really get his season started, and hope that he can get between kind of 7 and 10 goals in the Premier League this season to really help Spurs push on. And let's see what happens in that Newcastle game next. It'll be an exciting one next weekend. Okay, just some more Spurs news before that Everton win end of last week. Son Heung-min did an interview with the BBC, and I thought I'd bring some quotes to you because I haven't done a video since that. He was asked what he would like his legacy to be at the club, and he said the following. He said, "Legendary. Being at one team in 10 years is a good effort, I think. You have to be consistent with this, and you also have to give something back to the club. I still don't think I'm a legend of Tottenham Hotspur. I've said I want to win something with Spurs. Then I will be very happily called a legend. I joined Spurs to win a trophy, and I hope we can have a special season. I'm not setting a goal of where I should be." He said, "Imagine if I say 10 goals or something, and you score 10 goals in 6 games. Then your goal is done. I want to push as much as I can and never feel like it's enough. I want to go as high as possible in every aspect, team, individual, everything. Then we will see where we are at." He was also asked what thoughts he had about being captain. He said, "It's been good. I've learnt a lot of things in the last year. Being a captain in the Premier League takes a lot of responsibility. I'm still learning. It's not easy, but it is a good thing to do. It is very important. I'm not the loudest guy in the team, but if I have to be loud, I'm happy to do it. I just want to be a good example with good behaviour. We have such a young group of players, and if the captain does the right thing, then the players will do the same things. Off the pitch as well, I always try to be at a good level of what I'm doing, but the players are listening well, so I'm very grateful." I love those quotes from Sonny. I've said it many times, I'll say it again. Sign him up to a 15, 20-year contract. Get him as a club ambassador alongside Ledley King after he retires. He's the face of the club. He is just a brilliant ambassador for Tottenham Hotspur. And like I said earlier, still one of the world's most elite finishers. If we make him chances this season, he will score goals, and that will allow us to get closer to our end goal, which is challenging for the league in the long term and trophies in the short to medium term. Okay, before I get on with some other more wide-ranging Premier League transfer news, of which there's been a lot over the weekend, guys, thank you once again for watching my content. Please do press that like button. Please do subscribe. And if you're already a subscriber, please do spread the word about the channel to people who you think you'd like this content. Get them to press subscribe too. And if you'd like to become a member, I really appreciate it. Only £1 a month. All the details in the description box below. But let's start at Old Trafford. Juventus are in talks with Man United over a move for Jadon Sancho, although they are unlikely to be able to meet Man United's £40 million valuation. Can you believe Sancho available for only £40 million? He could be open to moving to Juventus on a loan deal, but United want him to go there with a very worse loan with an obligation to buy. Meanwhile, also from Italy, Napoli in talks with United over signing Scott McTominay, and Man United want that deal to be done because it would be pure profit based on PSR, and they'd be keen to sell him to a foreign club. Apparently, Scott McTominay keen to join Napoli. Over to Liverpool. Could be an interesting signing here if this one comes off. They are willing to offer Everton £63 million plus £7 million in add-ons, so £70 million total for England defender Jared Branthwaite from Everton, their main rivals. That would be an interesting one if that comes off. Not many players move from Liverpool to Everton or vice versa. Meanwhile, they're also clearly looking for a centre-back, because they're also monitoring Leverkusen defender Piero Hincapié, who, if you remember, Spurs fans, he was on Spurs' list just a year ago. And another player that Liverpool are looking at is Atalanta and Holland player Tien Koopmeiners, after missing out on Sociedad and Spanish international Martin Zubimendi. So Liverpool finally looking at potentially breaking their transfer duck this summer, although they've made a good start, haven't they? 2 wins out of 2. They looked pretty impressive yesterday in their 2-0 win at home to Brentford. Here's an interesting one. Spurs, obviously, a lot of this summer had been looking at a midfielder. It now looks like maybe they're happy with Bergvall and Gray, so then maybe they're not. But I do wonder whether they might have their interest peaked, because Manchester City are now willing to accept offers for Portuguese international Mateus Nunes. Only 25 years old, signed them from Wolves probably only around a year ago or two, and that is because of the return of Ilkay Gundogan to the Man City squad. Obviously, he went back there on a free last year. Another move that Man City are looking at making is for the 19-year-old Icelandic striker Ori Oskarsson from FC Copenhagen. He's being touted about as a potential signing for a few Premier League clubs. Very exciting young talent. They're looking at someone to replace Alvarez as a backup to the prolific Erling Haaland. Meanwhile, over to Aston Villa. They've agreed a deal with Bologna so that Bologna can take their 20-year-old English winger Samuel Illing Jr., who they signed on loan from Juventus this summer. If you remember, Illing Jr. was on Spurs' list as well, but he went to Villa, and now they're going to loan him back to Bologna, or loan him out to Bologna in the hope of him getting more minutes. Over to Chelsea and the endless Chelsea transfer talk. They have resumed talks with Napoli over Victor Osimhen. I said at the top, Osimhen now being touted around as potentially able to move anywhere for only £65 million. In fact, Napoli accepted a bid from Saudi for £65 million, so Chelsea will probably look to get him in, I would have thought. Chelsea are considering a move to try and swap Raheem Sterling, who is surplus to requirements there, with Jadon Sancho, so Sancho might have a choice between Juventus and Chelsea. Also, Raheem Sterling has been offered to Aston Villa, but Emery is not sure whether that would be a good move for them. Apparently, Sterling was kept in the dark by Chelsea about being frozen out, and has ruled out a move to Saudi Arabia. He wants to stay in Europe. Also, Kepa Arrizabalaga, let's just call him Kepa. The Chelsea goalkeeper who got in a strop when in that League Cup final anyway. He's joining Bournemouth on loan until 2025. He was on loan at Real Madrid last season, so that is a bit of a change of club for him, but he will probably get minutes at Bournemouth, and he's got a bit of a shaky reputation in England in terms of his goalkeeping, so maybe he's trying to rebuild that. Might be a good move for him. Meanwhile, Brighton have really splashed the cash this weekend. They've signed Matt O'Reilly from Celtic for £30 million. He was on Spurs' list. Looks like a good move for him. And another £30 million being splashed on Fenerbahce 24-year-old winger Ferdi Kadioglu. So Brighton, as we know, they really know which players they want and which players are going to take them on and potentially do well for them, and then also get a high sell-on fee. So you could see that working well for O'Reilly and Kadioglu. Meanwhile, at Everton, they are interested in England defender Kieran Trippier, who is after one big move now in the later stages of his career. He's 33 years old, but apparently AC Milan, Bayern Munich and a number of Turkish clubs also interested in Trippier. Meanwhile, another player who was on Spurs' lists, Santiago Jimenez. Forest have submitted a bid of £29.7 million to Feyenoord for the striker. He's a Mexican striker, been on Spurs' list, but they didn't pull the trigger on him. They went for Dominic Solanke instead. It would be a record sale for the Dutch club, so it'd be interesting to see whether Jimenez gets his move to the Premier League with Nottingham Forest. Over to West Ham, they're ready to offload James Ward-Prowse before Friday's transfer deadline. He did okay for them last season, but looks like Julian Lopetegui not interested in his particular brand of set-piece brilliance. And finally, over to South London with Arsenal. They are apparently giving up on their pursuit of Athletic Bilbao's Nico Williams. Looks like he's going to stay there for another season and maybe move to Barcelona when they get some money in another year's time. And talking of goalkeepers, Southampton are preparing a loan move for Arsenal's backup keeper, Aaron Ramsdale. I think that would be a good move for both parties. Guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. Please do press that like button, press that subscribe button if you're not already, and have a great rest of your bank holiday Monday. Cheers.